We're going to read through Federalist number 10. It's one of the most important Federalists. What I will do is I will just read through them first time. We just go over the whole thing, and then I will come back and we'll go over them paragraph by paragraph. I think that would be best for you too. This way you hear the whole thing, you think about it a little bit, see how much of it you understand, see if any questions come to you when we read it the first time. And then the second time, like I said, we'll just delve in a little deeper. Federalist Paper number 10, the interesting thing is that for the longest time, after it was written, nobody really talked about it that much. It was only when Charles Beard in 1913 took a real critical look at the founders of the United States, wrote his book, and he mentioned Federalist number 10 there. So from then on, it has become more important. Again, one of the requests I have of you is that try to start from Federalist number 1, go all the way to the end before you give it a final verdict. Because these guys are writing one essay or two essays a week, and they really don't know what shape 5 essays down the line will take. They're trying to explain the Constitution, federalism, and at the same time, they are answering their critics back, those anti-federalists that criticize them in the papers. So it's very important for us to go through all of the papers, all the 85, before you really make a judgment of all of them. So we said number 8 was important. None of the American scholars says number 8 is important because America is already united. But in our case, since we are talking about uniting the world, number 8 is very important because, like I mentioned it while we were going through it, is that one of the things that we are doing right now is we're wasting all this money and energy on armament, on armies, on military, instead of taking care of the planet, taking care of every single human being that lives on this planet, letting them flourish. Because in number 8, that's what Hamilton was saying about if you don't unite Americans, each single state is going to have a big standing army, and that big standing army sooner or later will be put to use by a dictator, a tyrant, a monarch, an absolute monarch, to take your freedoms away. Kind of what we see now all over the world. Every time there is some sort of perceived emergency, the governments want to take the power away from people, take their freedoms away, say, don't do this, take your shoes off when you're going to land the plane, when you go through the gates, all sorts of silly stuff. But it starts there, and then a camera everywhere to watch you, follow you online, see what you buy, what you sell, where you go. This is what happens when we take our freedoms for granted, and governments are always trying to find a way to take your freedom away for a host of reasons. But we will talk about that more. So let me start reading this. So the next few videos, I will just read them to you. I'll try to read them slowly and then we'll come back to them. All right. Oh, by the way, this is the first Federalist paper that Madison wrote, James Madison. So remember, up to now, it started with Hamilton in the first paper, then John Jay did 4 papers back to back, then it was Hamilton. Now for the first time, it's James Madison's paper. It says, among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. Now, this word faction is very important. I've already told you the meaning of it. Actually, Madison here gives us the meaning the way he wants us to see it. So we'll get there. And when it says violence, it doesn't necessarily, in here, doesn't mean violence like killing or injuring something. But this here, it has to do more with damage with integrity of something that is supposed to be held high by the public. So faction does damage to the integrity of the system. The friend of popular governments never finds himself so much alarmed for their character and fate as when he contemplates their propensity to this dangerous vice. Okay, remember, every time you hear the word vice, it's opposite of virtue, and especially 2 centuries ago, virtues were things you did, behavior you showed, and everything else that was good for the good of the public, your community, your bigger community. And vice was exactly the opposite. So every time you hear that, just kind of think about it that way. And when he says the friend of popular government, the popular, just like the word we hear now, popularity contest, he doesn't mean it like that. He's saying it in a sense that it's something, a government that's good for all of the people, not just the political parties or factions, but something that's good for all of the people. A root of the word popular is actually from a Latin people. Okay? So keep that in mind. He will not fail, therefore, to set a due value on any plan which, without violating the principles to which he is attached, provides a proper cure for it. The instability, injustice, and confusion introduced into the public councils have, in truth, been the mortal diseases under which popular governments have everywhere perished, as they continue to be the favorite and fruitful topics from which the adversaries to liberty derive their most specious declamations. So he's trying to find the cure for this disease of faction. Okay? It's kind of what he has in mind throughout this paper for us. And by the way, when he uses the word perish, it's one of the words that I like because Abraham Lincoln uses it in the Gettysburg Address. And I love Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because if he were not president during the Civil War, any other person would have given up and let the South go. And then there would not be any federalism, or a healthy, successful federalism, for us to look and check and study and learn from. That's why one of the reasons I like Abraham Lincoln a lot is because anybody else would have been the president probably a year into the war, a year into the Civil War, they would have given up and they would have let the slaves in states that they had slavery separate. They would have made their own confederacy, maybe one, maybe two, and probably the future of the world would have changed one way or the other for the worse for a while. So, and most importantly for us, federalism has been with us, and we can study it and learn from it, and maybe write a blueprint, a new blueprint for the union of the world. And one more thing, I mentioned the word vice. Here on this map, I showed you, one of the things I showed was the work that Madison had done under the title Vices of the Political System of the United States. What was awful about the 13 different governments in 13 different states. So again, to remind you, we are doing what Madison did, except we are doing it in a huge scale. We will study federalism just like he studied what had happened in the governments of the states over the 11 years from the Declaration of Independence all the way to the Constitutional Convention. And we will study the experience of federalism in different countries and learn a lot and write a blueprint for the future of humanity.